It was the night before Thanksgiving, November 24th, 1971. The skies above the Pacific Northwest were dark and heavy with rain. At Portland International Airport, travelers shuffled through the terminal. Some excited to get home for the holiday, others tired from the long day. Among them was a man unremarkable in appearance, wearing a dark suit, a tie, and a raincoat. He carried nothing but a briefcase. To the gate attendants, he seemed ordinary calm, polite, maybe even forgettable. He purchased a one-way ticket, paid in cash, and walked casually toward the waiting plane, Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305, a short 30-minute hop to Seattle. His name, he told the ticket agent, was Don Cooper. He didn't know it then, but within hours, the name Cooper would become legend through a reporting error in the newspapers. Don Cooper would be misprinted as D.B. Cooper, a mistake that would stick forever, cementing itself as one of the most famous names in American crime history. As passengers boarded the Boeing 727, Cooper slipped into seat 18C in the rear of the cabin. He ordered a bourbon and soda, lit a cigarette, and watched the rain streak down the window. To the flight attendants, he seemed quiet and composed nothing unusual. But tucked inside his briefcase, he claimed, was something that would soon change everything, a bomb. Shortly after takeoff, Cooper motioned for one of the flight attendants, Florence Schaffner. He handed her a folded note. She assumed it was just another businessman passing his number, so she slipped it into her pocket without looking. Cooper leaned in slightly, his voice calm, almost reassuring, and said, "Miss, you'd better read that note." "I have a bomb." Her heart skipped. She unfolded the paper. In neat block letters, the message was simple but chilling. "I have a bomb in my briefcase. I want you to sit beside me." Florence sat. Cooper cracked open his briefcase just enough to reveal wires, red cylinders, and batteries. Whether it was real or a masterful bluff, she didn't know, but it looked convincing enough. Then came the demands. Cooper instructed her to relay a message to the cockpit. He wanted $200,000 in cash. He wanted for parachutes. And when the plane landed in Seattle, he wanted a fuel truck ready to refuel the aircraft for a getaway. The captain notified air traffic control, who in turn contacted the FBI. Instantly, the situation escalated. A hijacking was underway. But here was the strange thing. Cooper wasn't erratic. He wasn't angry. He wasn't violent. Passengers on board had no idea anything unusual was happening. To them, it was just another short evening flight. Cooper even ordered another bourbon, paid his tab, and told the flight attendants to make sure the passengers were comfortable. He was polite, calm, almost professional. And yet, he held the lives of everyone on board in his hands. As Flight 305 cruised toward Seattle, the FBI scrambled on the ground. The airline executives, fearing for the lives of 36 passengers and crew, decided to comply. They began gathering the ransom, $200,000 in unmarked $20 bills, the equivalent of more than $1 million today. Along with the money, they secured for parachutes due primary to reserves. Why for? Because Cooper had been clever. By demanding multiple parachutes, he gave the impression he might force hostages to jump with him. The FBI couldn't risk handing him sabotaged equipment. It could endanger innocent lives. It was a detail that showed Cooper wasn't just bold, he was calculating. Meanwhile, in the cabin, Cooper's behavior baffled the crew. He didn't rant or rave. He didn't try to control the passengers. He simply sat calmly, sipping his bourbon, wearing dark sunglasses even in the dim light. He even made small talk with the stewardess. At one point, he remarked on the weather, saying it would be good for parachuting. When the plane touched down in Seattle, the atmosphere was tense but oddly controlled. Cooper instructed the crew to keep the cabin lights dimmed and the passengers' windows shut to prevent snipers from getting a clear shot. On the tarmac, FBI agents waited nervously. A flight attendant walked out to retrieve the ransom and parachutes, then returned inside. Once the money and equipment were secured, Cooper released the 36 passengers, letting them walk off the plane unharmed. To them, it was a relief most had no idea how close they'd been to danger. But Cooper kept the pilots, flight engineer, and one flight attendant aboard. The real escape was just beginning. With the ransom in hand and the passengers safe, Cooper gave his next set of instructions. The plane was to take off again, this time heading south toward Mexico City. But he was very specific about the conditions. The plane must fly low around 10,000 feet. The landing gear must remain down. The cabin must stay unpressurized. Speed should not exceed 200 knots. The pilots, puzzled, explained that the 727 couldn't make it all the way to Mexico City under those conditions without refueling. Cooper calmly agreed to a refueling stop in Reno, Nevada. As the jet roared back into the rainy night, the crew noticed Cooper becoming more active. He instructed the flight attendant to move to the cockpit and stay there. Alone in the rear of the plane, he gathered the money, strapped on a parachute, and prepared for what was coming. At 8:13 p.m., somewhere over the dense forests of Washington state, the crew in the cockpit felt a sudden, sharp movement and upward lift in the tail section. Cooper had lowered the rear stairway and jumped. Just like that, he vanished into the storm. The crew landed the plane safely in Reno hours later, but when FBI agents stormed aboard, Cooper was gone, leaving behind only his tie, a few cigarette butts, and the lingering smell of bourbon. The greatest manhunt in American history was about to begin. When news of the hijacking broke, America was stunned. A man had boarded a passenger jet, extorted $200,000, and parachuted into the stormy night, vanishing without a trace. No hijacker had ever pulled off something so bold, so cinematic, and so utterly mysterious. The FBI launched one of the most extensive manhunts in history. They called it NORYUK, short for Northwest Hijacking. The search begins. Hundreds of agents, soldiers, and local law enforcement scoured the forests, rivers, and mountains of southwest Washington, searching for any sign of Cooper. They expected to find a body. The conditions that night had been brutal: freezing rain, high winds, and near total darkness. Jumping into that wilderness, weighed down by a bulky parachute and a bag full of cash, seemed like suicide. But no body was found, no parachute, no briefcase, nothing. It was as if Cooper had melted into the night air. Following the money, the ransom bills had been carefully recorded, their serial numbers logged. Banks, casinos, and businesses across the country were put on alert. If any of those bills surfaced, they'd be traced. But for years, none appeared. Cooper, it seemed, had either hidden the cash brilliantly or hadn't survived to spend it. Then, in 1980, a break. A young boy vacationing with his family along the Columbia River discovered a bundle of decayed $20 bills buried in the sand. When the FBI examined them, they confirmed the serial numbers matched Cooper's ransom. It was only $5,800, still bundled in rubber bands, degraded by years of exposure. But it raised more questions than answers. Had Cooper buried the money? Had it washed downstream from a hidden stash? Or had he died nearby and the river carried the cash to shore? The mystery only deepened. Suspects everywhere. Over the decades, the FBI investigated hundreds of suspects. Ex-cons, military, paratroopers, missing men all were scrutinized. Some names gained traction. Richard Floyd McCoy, a Vietnam veteran who hijacked a plane in 1970 to using a similar method. He was arrested but later escaped from prison only to be killed in a shootout. Some believed he was Cooper himself, but the FBI ruled him out. Kenneth Christensen, a former paratrooper and Northwest Orient employee. He fit the description, lived quietly, and allegedly had unexplained money after 1971, but evidence was circumstantial. Robert Rackstraw, a former pilot and Army veteran with a checkered past. He was linked in documentaries and books, but the FBI said they lacked proof. Even women were suspected. Could Cooper have been in disguise? In the end, none of the suspects were definitively proven to be Cooper. The case grew colder with every passing year. The legend of Cooper, what made Cooper so fascinating, wasn't just the crime, it was the style. He wasn't violent. He wasn't cruel. He let the passengers go unharmed. He drank bourbon, smoked cigarettes, and disappeared into the storm like a ghost. To some, he became a modern outlaw folk hero, a man who embarrassed the system, outwitted the FBI, and maybe even got away with it. To others, he was a reckless criminal who may have died nameless in the woods. For decades, the FBI pursued leads. But in 2016, after 45 years, the Bureau officially closed the case. Cooper had become less of a suspect to catch and more of a legend that would never die. Even today, theories rage on. Did he survive? Did he live quietly under a new identity? Or is his skeleton still out there, tangled in the roots of the Northwest wilderness, waiting to be found? More than 5 decades later, the case of D.B. Cooper remains unsolved, and that unsolved nature is precisely why it refuses to die. A symbol of defiance for some Americans, Cooper came to symbolize rebellion against authority. At a time when the early 1970s were filled with social unrest, the Vietnam War, and distrust of government, Cooper seemed like the ultimate anti-hero. He robbed a corporation, tricked the system, and walked away without ever harming anyone. The fact that he parachuted into the unknown only added to the mystique. He wasn't caught on security cameras. He didn't brag about his crime. He didn't leave behind flashy trails of wealth. He simply disappeared. Cooper was a blank canvas, and Americans painted their own fantasies onto him. Was he a genius ex-military man who planned it all to perfection, a desperate loner making a last stand? Or just a reckless dreamer who gambled his life and lost? Pop culture, immortalization, the legend of Cooper spread far beyond the FBI files. He appeared in songs, novels, comic books, and even movies. From crime dramas to comedy sketches, his story was retold and reimagined. TV shows like Prison Break and Loki referenced him. Each version gave Cooper a different ending because no one knew the real one. Even beer companies, local businesses, and festivals used his name. In the Pacific Northwest, D.B. Cooper Day events were held. Restaurants sold D.B. burgers. There's even a Cooper-themed marathon. His crime had become less of a tragedy and more of a cultural myth, blending history with folklore. The FBI's quiet admission when the FBI closed the case in 2016. They admitted something subtle. Unless Cooper revealed himself, the truth might never be known. The Bureau had pursued over 1,000 suspects. They had scoured mountains, lakes, and forests. They had tracked ransom bills. They had interviewed eyewitnesses again and again. And yet nothing definitive. Cooper had beaten them, and in doing so had secured his place in history. Why we still care, the world has seen deadlier hijackers, more dangerous criminals, and higher-profile fugitives. But Cooper stands apart because of the simplicity of his plan and the mystery of its ending. We care because the story feels unfinished. We care because Cooper was never reduced to mugshots or prison photos. We care because every new suspect, every new theory, carries the hope that maybe this time we'll know. But perhaps, deep down, part of us doesn't want the mystery solved. Perhaps the legend of D.B. Cooper is stronger because of the silence. He is both ghost and man, both criminal and folk hero, both failure and success. And in the end, D.B. Cooper may remain what he always was, a shadow in the storm, forever just out of reach. Picture this: an airplane slicing through storm clouds, its engines roaring against the November night. Somewhere inside that jet, a man sits calmly with a briefcase, a black tie, and dark sunglasses. He is polite, soft-spoken, and strangely confident. Minutes later, he opens the rear staircase, steps into the freezing wind, and vanishes into darkness. That image has haunted America for more than 50 years. D.B. Cooper was no ordinary criminal. He didn't fire a shot. He didn't leave bodies behind. He didn't brag about his crime or seek glory. Instead, he executed a plan so daring and so mysterious that it continues to captivate generations. The world changed after Cooper's jump. Airlines rewrote their security rules. Airports installed metal detectors. Hijacking became harder, riskier, less romanticized. Cooper was the last of his kind, the outlaw who slipped through the cracks at the very edge of an era. But what became of him? Did he land safely, vanishing into a secret life of anonymity? Or did the storm swallow him, his body lost in the wilderness, his treasure buried beneath the earth? The truth remains locked in shadows, and maybe that's why we can't let go, because Cooper isn't just a man anymore. He's a symbol of the unsolved, the unanswered, the unknowable. He's the question that keeps investigators awake, the puzzle that storytellers return to, and the legend whispered every time a thunderstorm rolls across the Pacific Northwest sky. Perhaps the greatest trick D.B. Cooper ever pulled wasn't the hijacking. It was becoming a ghost untouchable, unforgettable, and eternal. So the next time you look up at a stormy sky, ask yourself, is he still out there? Or has D.B. Cooper been with us all along? living not in the forests or mountains, but in the one place he can never be caught, our imagination.